Good morning and welcome to LeaderEx today. It's great to have you in this track, and it's great to be kicking off with this topic of agile, adaptability, flexibility, whatever we want to call it. We know for sure that this is an absolute essential in every and any organization at the moment. We can't predict what will happen next. We're in an era, and the decade that lies ahead is going to be more disruptive than COVID and everything else we've experienced. Disruption after disruption. And we cannot reduce the uncertainty of the world that we live in. So we've got to prepare our people, we've got to prepare our organizations to deal with whatever happens. And that's really what agility, adaptability, flexibility is. So we know this. The big question is how? How do you do it? And I'd like to suggest to you that there are three essential foundations to agility that organizations are not taking seriously enough. Three essential pillars, if you like, that need to be built into your organizations, into your HR approaches, into your leadership and development, and into your people. The first is autonomy. When people say that they want flexibility, I think that what they really want is autonomy. What they really want is the ability, once we are sure that we know what it is that needs to be done, once that we are sure that we've mastered what needs to happen in the organization. You can't give autonomy to a person on the first day at work. New joiners, juniors need to be taken through the system. But once we know that we can trust people and that they can do the work that's been assigned to them, we need to work very hard and very quickly to give them a sense of autonomy, a sense of freedom in their ability to organize their day, to organize their hours. In other words, remove micromanagement. This is huge, and I think is one of the biggest things that we need to be working on in our organizations over the next few years. This is not just for the service organizations. This is not just for senior level staff. This is at every level of every organization. To put it in organizational terms, we need to distribute decision making. If you want to be McDonald's, in other words, if you want everything to be exactly the same every time, that was kind of the promise of McDonald's. You can come into our restaurant and you can buy a burger, and no matter where you are in the world, it will taste exactly the same. It will take just about the same amount of time to make, and you know exactly what you're going to get every single time. That's what you're paying for. If that's what you want, then stick with your hierarchical, authoritarian, top-down systems of management, because that way you can guarantee that you get consistency, predictability, you get efficiencies of scale, all the things the industrial era promised us. Some of you are still working in the industrial era, and I don't mean that in a good way, because I think even factories and manufacturing needs to shift to a different mindset. Because if we live in a world where the context is constantly changing, where we need people to adapt and respond to the situations that they find, not just following a formula, and when the formula is no longer valid, they put up a vacancy sign. You've been there because you've been on the other side of the counter where it says, system says no. You know, computer says, no, we can't do this. We don't want that environment. So you've got to distribute decision-making down into your teams, giving people the authority and the confidence and the competence to be able to do that. Let me give you an example of when this fails. We're all talking about hybrid at the moment. And what hybrid looks like, and coming back to the office after COVID. And too many of my clients are misunderstanding the very nature of hybrid. They're saying, right, we're going to do hybrid working. You have to be in the office 3 days a week. Which version of hybrid did they not understand? 3 days sounds to me like a random number. Why isn't it 2 days? Why isn't it 4 days? Why isn't it 2.5? And then why does it have to be 3 days? Why can't it be 5 days this week and 1 day next week? It's a fundamental misunderstanding of this, and it's an attempt to continue to keep control while pretending you're not. But you are, if you are putting these random numbers onto people. Let's be clear. The office is a tool, not a destination. There are things that you are going to do better together at the office. So do those things together at the office. But if you don't have any of those things to do this week, you don't have to come to the office, right? Now, why does the executive team, why does the HR team have to make the policy that it's 3 days a week when the policy should be use the office when the office is the right tool to use? Much better policy. But it now gives the responsibility and the authority to you and your team to have that conversation and decide how to use the tool appropriately. Starbucks have worked this out during COVID. When you get a Starbucks store, you've got to prove to Starbucks head office that you know what you're doing. You've got to prove that you can do Starbucks the way Starbucks intends Starbucks to be done. And once you've done that, and you're showing that you're getting good turnover and that all your systems are working, Starbucks come and say, would you like a little bit of freedom? Would you like a little bit of autonomy? And people who work at Starbucks are probably coffee snobs, right? Or coffee fans, at least, if not coffee snobs. And so when you give them a little bit of freedom and you say, would you like to experiment? Why don't you put up a special blend on the board? Why don't you try and offer something that's a little bit off the menu to one of your favorite clients who comes in every single day? So once you've proven you can do your work, that's the base, you've got mastery of your basic competence, you get given this layer of autonomy. And I'm sure you don't have to be told what happens to those stores. They get even better. Because, and all of you who are in HR, and I know we've got a lot of people in here from the HR side, you know every single engagement system, every single framework of employee engagement includes the concept of autonomy. There is not a single engagement model that doesn't have autonomy in the mix. But you are not doing enough of it. And you are making a mistake after COVID by going even further backwards than you were before COVID. Sort it out. Right. That's the first thing. Give people autonomy, otherwise you will never get agility and adaptability. The second thing that you need to do is you need to have a better conversation about the concept of peak performance. We want people to be productive. We want people to be efficient. We want people to give us their best at all times. But we're getting this conversation wrong. And COVID has taught us this, right? A lot of you have been surprised over the last 2.5 years as to how productive your teams have been able to be. If we had told you 3 years ago what lay ahead with COVID and lockdown, you would have said it's impossible. Yet here we are, and you've done brilliantly, except you are exhausted, right? High productivity is masking exhaustion. And exhausted people are not adaptable, agile, and future fit. Exhausted people are hanging on for dear life. The quiet quitting thing and all the rest is all part of this. It's not people choosing to give you the least. It's people giving you all they're capable of giving you because you've sucked too much out of them already. So don't blame the people, blame your systems. So what do we need to do? We need to learn lessons from the world of athletics and professional sport. This concept of peak performance. No athlete is able to get out on the field and give 100% of their energy for hours and hours and days at a time. Those of you who know rugby, it's the best example. Apologies if you're not a rugby fan. But the Springboks have sort of worked this out, although everybody's copying them now, so different story for another day. But it's the concept of saying a forward in the rugby team actually doesn't have 80 minutes of peak performance in a game. They've only got about 55. So we get them to give us 100% for 55 minutes, and then we take them off. We bring the bomb squad on, and everybody else says, oh, this is boring rugby, and we win the World Cup. Thank you very much. But you need to do this in your workplace. A lot of you think that what will make you more productive, what will make you a better employee, is to go to one more meeting, to spend another hour at work, to answer 3 more emails and 5 more messages. What will actually make you more productive is to take a little bit of time away from your to-do list and think a little bit. Take a little bit of time to do some learning, like coming today. Well done. You're doing this already by being at LeaderEx today. I hope you've told the office to stuff off and not contact you. You're not available. You're in an area of learning, a zone of development. Leave me alone. It's the curse of these smartphones. It's the curse of laptops that everybody knows you're always available. It's going to kill us. Don't do it. Henry Ford worked this out over 100 years ago. His factory was doing well, but he knew it could do better. The factory was working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. He did a little bit of research, and he discovered that if he reduced the time scale down to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, he got more out of his people. You can read up about it if you want to, but it's because if people are working exhausted, they work slow, they work badly, they make mistakes that need to be fixed up. In the end, it costs you more, even if on the day it looks cleverer. You've got Henry Ford and a few other companies and labor unions to thank for the current week that you've got. It then got turned into law in 1936. And now, of course, you're asking, but Graeme, has anybody done this work for us today? And the answer is yes. We have done the research, and you should only be working for 24 hours a week. You only have 24 hours of peak performance in your brain a week. Everything outside of that 24 hours is less than peak. I'm not saying you should only work 4 days a week. I'm not saying you should take long weekends every weekend. But I am saying we need to do a better job of managing peak performance. Because if you've only got 24 hours of good brain power in you every week, where are you putting those 24 hours? And how are you allocating those 24 hours amongst the others? We need excess capacity in the system if we are going to deliver agility and adaptability. And the final thing that you need to do is you need to experiment more. Build a culture of experimentation in your business. Like this guy, Andre Geim, who won a Nobel Prize for discovering graphene. But 10 years before then, he had won an Ig Nobel Prize, which is the prize given for the stupidest science research in the world in any given year. And he had found a way of levitating frogs using magnets. And he put it out in an official scientific paper, and everybody laughed at him. Except that came out of something called Friday experiments, where every Friday afternoon, he and his team just mess around in the lab. And they discovered how to levitate frogs, which nobody really needs. But 10 years later, they discovered graphene. And if you haven't heard of that, you will soon. He won a Nobel Prize for that 10 years later. And every Friday night, he does the same with his students at the University of Manchester. Because experimenting is how you find the future. We can no longer sit in a boardroom and think about the future. We have to try it out and see what happens. You cannot, to go back to my previous example, say, "Ooh, 3 days a week at the office is going to work." You can't say that if you haven't tried it. And you have to try it. And if it doesn't work, you try 2 days. And if it doesn't work, you try autonomy, which is better anyway, I've already told you. These are the three things that you need to start with. If you don't get these three things right, you will not get adaptability. You will not build agility into your system. You will not have a future fit organization. If you'd like more information, if you want to go deeper into any of these topics and find out what the other 77 things you could do to build agility is, please make sure you contact me. Thank you very much. My name is Graeme Codrington.